Tape Deck Media.
Hi there, I am Kelly Zemnikas, and I am the host of a brand new podcast called Holler and Wine. I'm a stand-up comedian, I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I genuinely love talking to people. And despite the fact that I do not care for the sound of my own voice, I've got a podcast now. So please come join us. We're going to have really good conversations. We're going to talk about cocktails, and I am going to give my guests a tarot card reading because why not? So join us on Holler and Wine. Hope to see you soon. Well, it's a podcast, so it's hear you soon? That sounds weird.
Ruddle me this, ruddle me that. We got the riddles that'll make you chat. Oh yeah, baseline stuff with groove is tight. Get your funk on, we're rocking tonight. One more time.
Good morning, Ruddle Maniacs. Welcome back to another episode of Ruddle Me This. I am, as always, your faithful host, Huge Hefner. Hang on, I fucked it up. Huge Hefner Taylor Ruddle. Oh dear, I am tired. Welcome back to the show. Got a great episode for you today. What's this? What's that? The sound I hear? Is that the sound of breaking glass? It is. Well, so many months ago, I recorded a couple of episodes that I put behind glass as a preventative measure for me being too tired or too busy to record a podcast and release it on the week. And it looks like today we are going to be releasing the first one of those two today. If you want to find out why I'm unable to record a podcast in the moment today, go ahead and head over to my YouTube channel and watch the episode of my vlog called 48 Hours in Auckland, which actually, now that I think about it, it was more like 56 hours. I don't know. I got stuck. I got stuck in Auckland on Saturday, the day I was supposed to be coming home, due to a lot of fog in Christchurch. Apparently Christchurch takes on a certain Silent Hill approach to mist, and so planes couldn't land, so I got stuck up there. And it is now the 15th of August when I'm recording this, and I am still tired. So I did a lot of walking up in Auckland, and then had a very, very long travel day. Had a couple of days to sort of recuperate, but then straight after that, had some acting I had to do, 2 quiz nights. I'm just going to record this and then head off to host a bingo night at the Retropolitan Social. I believe the regular host is sick. Then I got another podcast tomorrow. Tim Kelly, that one should be dropping in several weeks. It'll be a funny one. He's absolutely hilarious. And then on Saturday, I'm going out for dinner for my birthday. We're going to go crush some sushi. And then the following week, I am doing... What am I doing? We are going more acting on Tuesday, 2 quiz nights. Then on Thursday, I'm going to be down in Twizel. So by the time this drops, I will have been already back from Twizel. As of this moment, about a week before the show, I have not sold any tickets to my Giggles and Ghost Stories event. So I'm hoping that by the time you're listening to this, some tickets have sold. And we had a nice little night of Giggles and Ghost Stories. But to be continued. I guess I'll check in with you about that in next week's podcast, maybe? We shall see. So anyway, we have broken the glass, and the episode that I recorded back in March, apparently, was me talking about how I got started in Japan doing stand-up comedy. I've actually never told this full story on a podcast before, so we've got a Ruddle Me This exclusive. We've got the scoop here on all things Taylor Ruddle, and I appreciate you listening along. So I think that's all from me. Enjoy the episode. I'm going to be re-listening to it myself when it drops, so I'm hoping I didn't say anything too salacious or controversial. And with that, take it away past me. Alrighty folks, hello, welcome to the show. If you are listening to this podcast, then it very likely means that another podcast I had planned to do has fallen through. And so this podcast is acting as my in case of emergency break glass podcast. I'm recording this at the start of March 2024, and who knows when it's going to go out to the public. But I appreciate you listening, appreciate you tuning in to whenever this may be in the future. The topic I'd like to talk about today is actually kind of my origin story about how I got involved with stand-up comedy. So here we go. It all kind of started in 14 or 15. I'm getting a little bit spotty on the dates as, I'm just realizing now it has been 10 years since I went to Japan. So that was what happened what was my situation like in 2014 or 15? I was living with my parents in Christchurch, New Zealand, working as a store manager in a pizza chain called Hell Pizza in the Hornby branch. I believe we had just ended my first ever proper adult relationship. I've been dating initially a friend, turned into a girlfriend for just under 2 years, I think. And as you can imagine, was not happy at all with my lot in life there. Very, very miserable. I've come to learn that I am not one suited towards the hospitality or retail, whatever you'd call it. Before I started that job, I remember thinking that most people were pretty easygoing. But man, if you wanna really quickly learn how annoying people are, then get a job in fast food, because my day pretty much entirely consisted of just people complaining about everything. I've always found that so bizarre that people would get in such a fuss over having to wait an extra 5 minutes for their food, which they literally have not had to lift a finger to get from their house, from the restaurant, literally to their doorstep. I get it. You're paying for a service, and they advertise the service as around 30 minutes to 45 minutes, depending on when what time it is. But people would absolutely lose their shit if, they order food on a Friday night at 5 o'clock when they know that's when every other fucker in the suburb is doing the same thing, and they do the shocked Pikachu face when it doesn't turn up exactly in 30 minutes. I don't know what company it was that did that 30 minutes or less, or it's free thing, but that fucked up pizza delivery people for ages, because every customer had it in their head that if it didn't get there in 30 minutes, then it was free, which is ridiculous. How do you make money doing that as a pizza delivery chain? Anyway, I'm getting a little bit off topic there. Really did not enjoy that job. My co-workers were cool, and it was close to home. It started at about 11 o'clock in the mornings, which is not the worst, as jobs go. But I was attempting to get a job as a graphic designer, which, spoiler alert, never happened. I did eventually, but there's one thing they always used to tell us back in the days of us being a student, is they always used to say, you're basically not going to get a job based off of your folio alone. It's going to be because you know someone there, or you know someone who introduced you to the person that's hiring you, whatever it is. And boy, gee whiz, were they right on that one. If you've ever been in a long job search before, you'll know how soul-destroying that is. You've got to write your little cover letter, and you've got to you've got to lie about how you're passionate about. I remember applying for a place that sold bicycle parts, and I was going to be a marketing or graphic design guy for that. And, among 30 other different ones, I don't remember how it felt like constantly. And, just getting turned down and down and down. And what sucked is I had two friends that got jobs straight out of being students, and they went into what at the time seemed like pretty cushy jobs, but maybe in hindsight, not as cushy as I thought they were. So as you can imagine, a bit of a low point for me. Recently dumped. Terrible. Well, the job's not terrible. It's just I wasn't suited for it. I think for the right personality, that job can be quite rewarding. But for me, it was just essentially being disrespected all day long. and then going home and my feet hurt and I'm too tired to do anything else, and rinse and repeat. Oh, and then all my friends being like, how come you're never free to hang out on Friday nights? It's like, well, because literally the busiest day in our store, the one day you cannot get off a week in fast food service is Friday. So then one night I was, I think I was watching Game of Thrones. That was the time of life when I got really into Game of Thrones. I don't remember what season that is, but it was around the time that they had that big fight on the water where they shot the wildfire and blew everything up. And my cousin, who was actually living in Japan at the time, as of the time of this recording, he and his family have just moved back to New Zealand. But at the time, he had been in Japan for like 17 years, 15 years, some really long amount of time. Like his wife and kids and that were Japanese. Of course, his kids are going to be Japanese if he's white. You know what I mean? And he suggested that I try give it a punt over there because I had sort of had nothing really holding me back in New Zealand. So he sort of walked me through the process of how to apply for a working holiday visa, how to get all that sort of thing squared away. And this is how naive I was, as I thought like working holiday visa was just something you could, like that was just a visa that you could apply for and then you could live there basically. But towards the end of my year in Japan, someone pointed out to me that no, the working holiday visa is something you get once during a lifetime. So it is a really, really great opportunity. But if you're going to do it, then absolutely make the most of your year because you only get one. I suppose I could talk a little bit about the process for anybody that's listening that wants to potentially do this. If I remember correctly, the process to getting a working holiday visa in Japan is you had to be under 30. They might have changed this, but I know some countries you have to be a certain age. I had to provide them with a schedule as to what I was going to be doing, which is kind of hard to do because you don't really know, you don't really know what you're going to be doing and where you're going to be working. But apparently just like a rough timeline of what you intend to do was fine. Like I had, my cousin sort of walked me through it. He said, say you'll try to do this here. You'll try to go to the, like a ski slope, just like seasonal work, that sort of thing. And then I think I had to provide some proof that I had money, like a certain amount of money to live for a little bit. And then also the really tricky part was they wanted to, you had to buy a ticket in and out of Japan before they'd even given you the visa. And that was a weird phone call because the guy called me that worked for the consular office was like, yeah, we just need you to supply a plane ticket. And I was like, well, what if I don't get the visa? And I think the guy was in between a bit of a rock and a hard place where he had to be like, well, you're not going to get it, but also we can't give it to you until you get the tickets. And I forget exactly what he said, but he very heavily implied that like, don't worry, like you just like, you'll be all good if you give us the tickets. I also remember a funny interaction with, I think the consular office of Japan in New Zealand has moved since then. But the way it was set up was you'd walk up a ramp, like in order to get to the main door, and the ramp would kind of go in a loop. It was like a wheelchair accessible ramp. And there was a door to the left of this like hook in the ramp. And then you walk up to the main door, and there was evidently a security guard who his job was to, stop undesirables from getting in, which doesn't make any sense as to why I was allowed in. But I remember his little trick was like you would walk past the first door, then you would get to the main door, and then you would just hear a voice behind you being like, hey buddy, how can I help you? And you'd like whip around like you're kind of on the back foot at that point, like, whoa, where the hell did you come from? And whether that was a deliberate move on his part, I don't know, but he caught me off guard the first time. And then the second time I was ready for him, and he looked real disappointed that he didn't surprise me. So wherever that absolute jokester is, I hope you're doing well, sir. And, good luck with the bants in the future. Good luck with the hijinks, as it were. So then actually getting to Japan, very long flight, very expensive flight from New Zealand. I think I paid around $2,000 maybe for the return trip. I can't really remember. It's a long time ago. And when I arrived there, obviously I had a lot of help from my cousin and his wife to help me figure out like where to live. I ended up living at a shared house that was called Shelley style, I think it was. That's a great example of Japanglish there. And I really enjoyed living there because it was like it wasn't quite a hostel. We all had our own bedrooms, which had our own toilets, but there was a big shared, well, there was 2 shared kitchens actually, like shared common areas, and then like some other little areas that, balconies and stuff that you could all sort of congregate on. And aside from the obvious fact of people are animals in the kitchen and would leave dirty dishes and everything just lying about, it was really cool to have like a big shared kitchen because there was all these different burners and a few rice cookers lying around. There was like shared fridge space, everything like that. I think I got a mini fridge for my room. I can't really remember. Oh, no, that's right. I had one in my room, but I thought it didn't work because it just wasn't plugged in properly. Like it was plugged in, but some plugs you have to kind of jostle around until it connects. So I thought for about a year that my mini fridge didn't work, only to learn like that it actually did. The other thing that I remember about that being tough was the bed. It wasn't much of a bed. It was like a piece of plywood up on like a stand. Didn't have slats like some beds do. And then on top of that was like the thinnest futon you've ever slept on. And it's not the end of the world when you're in your 20s. You can kind of sleep anywhere at that point. I still remember we took this trip. My mother and my brother visited us. We went to Tokyo for a couple of days, and us getting back was such a long day because we caught the Shinkansen, which is like the bullet train, and the day we were coming back it was so lucky that my mother had the initiative to do this, but there was like a typhoon warning, and that actually we tried to go to Disney World, but they didn't let us in unless you had a ticket already. It was this weird system where they were like, because there's a typhoon coming, we're not going to sell any extra tickets, but if you already have one, like we can't stop you from coming in or something. It was really odd. So then the next day, Mum woke us up at like 7 or something, some real early time, and we left real early to try and beat the typhoon. And I believe we actually did get stopped a couple of times on because of the typhoon. I think maybe it was too windy or something, but like for the most part we got out like relatively unscathed. And I remember it was a long day. This is like, I think it's about 5 hours or something on the Shinkansen. So then we get back to Fukuoka, which is where I was living. I don't know if I said that at all. I lived in a city called Fukuoka. So we got back to the center of town, and then I couldn't sort of leave my parents, or my mum, my brother, to just like find their own way back to the hotel because they don't know where the hell anything is. So we caught that train back. Then I had to catch a train with them to their accommodation. Then I had to catch a train back into the city centre. And then from that, I had to catch my local train line home to Shirley Style. And I was like, I cannot remember being that tired. There's very few other situations I remember being that tired. And all I could think of was like, all I've got waiting for me back at the room is this paper thin mattress, this little futon. But like I tell you, I was that tired when I got back. It may as well have been my own bed for how quickly I fell asleep. I just crashed immediately and I was out. So I always think of that futon whenever I'm having to sleep in an uncomfortable place. Like I slept on a foam mattress kind of recently, and I thought to myself, if you can spend a year sleeping on the thinnest little futon you've ever seen, then you're going to be absolutely fine here. So I should talk about where I stayed. I was in a city called Fukuoka, which if you know Japan, there are sort of 4 main islands. There's the top one, which is Hokkaido, and that's like the little diamond-shaped thing at the top. Then there's Honshu, which is like the big island in the center. That's where Tokyo and Osaka and that are. I think Honshu just means like mainland or main island, something like that. There's a little one like out and to the right of the of Honshu. I cannot remember what that's called. And then the bottom island is Kyushu, which is the southern island. And Fukuoka is kind of the capital of that island, if you will. It's the biggest city in the island. And it's like, honestly, I mean, to be fair, I haven't lived in many cities, but like Fukuoka is one of the greatest cities I've ever lived in. of all 2 cities I've lived in, Fukuoka's got to be in the top 10, especially coming from New Zealand, where everything is so car-centric. Well, Christchurch specifically, maybe Auckland's a little better, but Christchurch, where I live now, is so... You just need a car to get around. And it's so silly because they're developing little townhouses and apartments and stuff now. They're finally getting on board with the intensification. But I was just noticing this the other day that none of them have car parks. So you buy this little house, which is in the CBD, but you don't have anywhere to park your car, and the public transport's shit. So, and people are like full of rage against cyclists here in Christchurch. So it's not really safe to cycle. So I just look at it and I'm like, how are they expecting people to get around the city if you don't have space to have a car, but there's no other option? Like walking, obviously, but the city's not walkable, especially not if you're like me and you're unfit. The city's definitely not walkable. And, you know, compared to somewhere like Wellington, I think Cuba Street is kind of their CBD, from what I understand, very walkable, good public transport. Dunedin, the Octagon, as far as I can see, very walkable. I certainly have managed it, and I'm very unfit. Nelson, which I've been to a couple of times for shows and stuff. Great CBD, very walkable. Christchurch, horrible. I didn't even know what you'd consider town. It's maybe the Terrace. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit off topic here. Fukuoka, just great public transport. They have 2 train lines, one going horizontal across the city and one going sort of vertical across the city, which basically gets you everywhere you need to. The 2 lines sort of converge. Like there have been times that I had to catch a train in from where I was. I was in the horizontal train line. My local station was called Ijiri, which had one of the weirdest kanji ever. From what I could tell, the kanji for Ijiri meant like arse well, or like well of arses. A very strange thing to call your call your station, but I loved it, and took about 15 minutes maybe to get from the CBD, which was called Tenjin, which just means like heaven god or something like that. Tenjin is like the city centre with all the shopping and everything, and it was just fantastic. I love trains. I wish we had trains here in New Zealand. The other thing that I liked about Japan is I don't know if it's safer to cycle, but it certainly felt like it was safer to cycle because you actually cycle on the footpaths. And they've got these nice big wide footpaths there, or sidewalks to any American listeners. And this was a little bit naughty, but you don't actually have to wear a helmet in Japan. And I never did, which New Zealand people are probably tutting at me right now and calling me a irresponsible cyclist. But like, it's just so much safer when you're on the footpath. The worst thing that can happen is you crash into another cyclist, and they don't get that much speed up on the sidewalks. But yeah, I miss cycling so much. I used to, we'll skip ahead a little bit, but it's not super relevant to this story, but I ended up studying at a Japanese school, the YMCA, for a couple of years. And so my morning routine, I eventually moved out of Shirley style and I got my own little apartment in Hakata-ku. So the interesting thing about Fukuoka is there was a bit of I actually don't remember why they did it, but at one point the whole city was referred to as Hakata. I think maybe because Hakata was the main trading hub. I'm not entirely sure why they renamed it to Fukuoka. Fukuoka means like lucky hill, I think it was. Fuku is luck and oka is hill. Yeah, so Fukuoka, lucky hill. Hakata, I could never figure out what it meant. The first one looked like it was something like a temple, and then ta looked to me like the kanji for numerous, so maybe it meant a lot of temples. But anyway, my morning routine, it took me like 10 minutes to cycle in from my house, or my little apartment, to Tenjin, which is where my school was. And there was nobody on the footpaths at that time. It was glorious. So anyway, backtracking a little bit, staying on topic, Taylor. Fukuoka, fantastic transport. Always felt really safe. Never felt like I was in danger at all. The food is just neck level. Like, I cannot even describe how good the food in Fukuoka is. The main thing that it's known for is ramen. They call it tonkatsu ramen, which is, I think it's like pork bone ramen. No, sorry, I've said that wrong. Tonkatsu is pork cutlets. Tonkotsu is pork bone broth. And that's one thing I've missed so much since I've came back to New Zealand, is you just can't find a good tonkatsu. I'm going to do that. I'm going to make that mistake a lot. Tonkotsu ramen. You just can't find a good tonkotsu ramen. And if you do, it costs like $20. It's prohibitively expensive. Whereas in Japan, just some little hole-in-the-wall ramen store, it would cost like 380 yen for ramen, and that's like $3. And it would be better than anything I've found in New Zealand here. So that's like, yeah, the food was just insane. Japanese food just in general is like off the charts. As of the recording time of this, a couple of nights ago, I actually tried unagi, which is eel, for the first time. And I got to tell you, I actually didn't mind it that much. But the way they serve it is a little bit weird. I got unagi don, which, like any Japanese food that ends with don, means over rice, which I think don itself just means ball or rice ball, because you'll get gyudon, which is like beef ball, something like that. You get what is it called, oyakodon, which means like this dish always makes me so sad when I really think too much about it. But oyakodon means oyako is parent and child, oya is parent and ko is child. So you can imagine it is that dish of like chicken meat. They fry it up a little bit, and then they mix in a couple of eggs, so it's kind of all mixed together, and then they put that over rice. And I could never bring myself to eat it, just because there's something so bleak about the idea of eating oyakodon, children and parent bowl. So I've never had oyakodon, but it is very popular comfort food over in Japan. So yeah, I had unagi don, which was eel bowl, and I quite liked it. The glaze they put on it is really nice. I think it was like a teriyaki sort of teriyaki kind of glaze. And the meat was not what you'd expect. You probably expect eel to be slimy, but it wasn't at all. And it was just a tiny bit fishy, which I actually really liked. It was just the right level of fishy. What I wasn't so keen on is the way they serve it. Is it seems like they just kind of fillet the eel, and I guess they kind of grill it or something, but they don't really remove. It looks like they don't really remove much in the way of like skin. So that the mental picture of that was a little bit hard to get past. But it did taste very good, and I think I could probably get used to eating it if I really set my mind to it. So that was basically Fukuoka. It's just a fantastic place to live. Transport is amazing. Cost of living wasn't too bad. I was paying about 400 or 500 New Zealand dollars a month in terms of my rent. Bills in Japan are a little bit interesting. They get sent to your house, and you get individual ones. So you have power, you have water, and you have gas, I think were the three that I had to pay. And they all get sent independently. They don't wrap them up or anything. It's not one company. And you get these forms that get sent to you, and then you take them to the convenience store, and you kind of just hand them to the guy, and you say, "Onegaishimasu," and then you can pay your bills at the convenience store. You can actually pay for a lot of stuff. I bought something on Amazon, and I just brought the receipt to the convenience store. I didn't have a credit card. They're really wary about foreigners getting credit cards over there. So I bought something off Amazon. I think it was boxing hand wraps. I'm not quite sure. It might have been that, or it might have been something else. It might have been shoes. I struggled to find shoes over there. And yeah, you just hand it over to them, and they scan it, and then you pay the money. You can pay it in cash. It's awesome, honestly. Great system.
Sorry to interrupt the show, but I gotta be a shill for a second. I'm historically bad at self-promotion, but it's one of those things I need to get better at, so here goes. If you like what I do and want to support me going forward, here's how. The main thing you can do if you want to help this podcast grow is to tell people about it, share my posts and reels on social media, and of course, leave a cheeky review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcatcher. In terms of social media, here's where to follow me. My tag on everything is @Taylor Ruddle Comedy. Follow me on Facebook or Insta to see all upcoming gigs and live dates. Follow me on YouTube, TikTok, or Insta to see reels of the podcast as well as skits and stand-up clips. I've also got 2 free comedy specials up on my YouTube page as well, with plans to release another 2 full-length ones by the end of the year, so give me a subscribe so you don't miss out. Once a month I host a podcast called Hosstown with my friend and comedic colleague Matt Lilly. It's a light-hearted take on modern masculinity as the two of us try to strike a balance between being scholars and cavemen with plenty of belly laughs along the way. Hosstown is eventually going to have its own feed on the Tape Deck Media Network, but for now, the easiest thing to do is to search Hosstown Podcast into YouTube, where you can watch the full videos of the full episodes. We release them all free up on there. You can, of course, catch me live all over Christchurch with quizzes, musical bingo, and of course comedy nights. Go and follow my Facebook page to keep up to date with those. I've also got a survey running at the moment so that I can find out what people do and don't like about the podcast. Visit taylorruddle.com/podcast to have your say. It really helps me out. I'll chuck a link in the show notes to that. Thank you for indulging me. That's all the shilling out of the way. Let's get back to the show.
So yeah, very livable city. The climate is pretty good. It gets a little bit hot in summer times. Like, I'm currently like dying in New Zealand this year. We're getting like 30 degree, 31, 32 degree summer days. And, yeah, I'm immediately like, the sky is falling, it's global warming, we are doomed, and all that kind of thing. Apparently, though, like, I assumed we were hitting like record highs. Apparently not, though. Apparently New Zealand has had 30 days in the past before. And then the thing is, in Japan, I'm pretty sure we had some 40 days in Fukuoka in the summers. It was absolutely brutal. To give you an idea of how hot it would be, like, I sweat pretty badly anyway. And on a summer morning, when I was walking into the office, just the walk from like the air-conditioned subway to my air-conditioned classroom, I would literally sweat through my shirt. I'd have to bring an extra shirt to change into for class. I had my first white Christmas in Japan as well, because one thing that Japan thinks it's unique, and Japan tends to think that it's the only country that has 4 seasons. And because if you look at the map, Japan's kind of in the center of everything, because it's weird. It's kind of a tropical country because they have a typhoon season as well, which further confuses me because they talk about having 4 seasons, but then they also talk about having the rainy season or the typhoon season. So I don't know what they're going on about there. But yeah, I had my first white Christmas because it gets cold enough to snow in the winter. I did learn that was quite rare. The second year that I was in Fukuoka for Christmas, it didn't snow. It didn't get cold enough to snow. So it does snow, but it's not guaranteed to snow every Christmas. So I was quite grateful that I got to experience a white Christmas, because if you're an international listener, you'll probably not know that New Zealand's Christmas is in the middle of summer. One of my weirdest, but also kind of like fondest memories about living over there was this time that I got really sick. And this is something interesting just to talk about the sort of pandemic hand washing habits that I've picked up. Is, I think I may have talked about this before, but I actually don't think I've gotten properly sick outside of the time that I caught COVID. I don't think I've been sick since the pandemic started, which was 2019, whenever that kicked off. And I caught probably the worst flu that I've had my whole life when I was living in Japan. And it was this bizarre... I'll try to paint the picture to you, and I'll try to paint you word pictures. So it was around the New Year time. It would have been around the end of the year, probably December. And around the New Year in Japan, a lot of people go home to their family or their hometown over the New Year. It's less of a Christmas thing and more of a New Year. That's the family holiday for them. So I was kind of just alone. A lot of my friends and all that had gone back. And then especially being at the end of the year, a lot of friends that were foreigners and such, they're just gone at that point because the visas run out and everything like that. So I remember it being a particularly kind of solitary time for me. And this must have been towards the end of my stint. I stayed in Japan for 3 years, and so this whole memory is kind of tinged with melancholy as everything was winding down. Like my last stretch in Japan is, melancholic. It's not depressing as such, but there was definitely a feeling I had of the end of an era, because we'll get into the stand-up comedy after this, but a lot of my friends that I met were also university students from like different countries in the world, and they were doing like an exchange program to live in Japan for, I think must have been 2 or 3 years. I don't know how long university takes to complete. It felt like at the end of this 3 years, my 3 years over there kind of lined up nicely with a lot of my friends' 3 years. So a lot of them had left and they're kind of moving on. They're going back to their countries to, I suppose, look for a job in their field. And a lot of my friends were away. And it was just this very solitary time that I remember. And I got really sick. I ended up getting a check from the doctor, and they said I had type B influenza, which is apparently supposed to be the gentler of the two, but it really knocked me about. It was one of the few times that I remember getting feverish and getting really, not delusional, but losing my grip on reality a little bit. And I needed to go to they call them drugstores over there, but in New Zealand we call them a chemist. I forget what I needed to buy. Probably something to help me with the fever. I'm struggling to remember what there was now. But I remember leaving my house and wandering. The route from my house to get to this drugstore was, I kind of walked along a river, not like a quaint little countryside river. It was in the middle of the city, so it was a big wide river with a big footpath along it. And I walked past, sort of through a neighborhood with a couple of these small temples. And because it was kind of New Year, a lot of people were visiting the temples. They're ringing the bells and making prayers and everything like that. And the sun was just starting to go down. It was just past the sunset when it's getting dark, but you can still kind of see the glow of the sun in the distance behind the clouds. And I remember it was snowing, and it had this weird juxtaposition because I was so feverish. I'm pretty sure I was just wearing a t-shirt and shorts because I was that hot. I might have had a jacket on though, I can't remember. And I walked into the drugstore and I got what I needed. And then when I got back out again, I remember just taking in everything around me and looking at all the snowflakes falling down and all the snow kind of on the ground at my feet. And you could feel I could feel the wind hitting me, and I could feel the cold, but I wasn't cold at all. And it was just this magical moment just after the sunset, everything's getting dark, and I'm almost losing it with delirious fever, but also in this weird way kind of marveling at the beauty of all the snow falling around me. It was a very, very distinct memory in my head, and I hope that memory sticks with me for a long time, as it was, weirdly beautiful. Anyway, before I get too into my feels, I should actually talk to you about how I got started in stand-up comedy. So when I was living there for the first year doing my first working holiday, I saw a post on like Reddit or Facebook or somewhere. I don't remember exactly where I saw it, but it essentially just said, would you like to try stand-up comedy? And the ironic thing is, just before I left New Zealand, I had been getting jokes ready to try and do some of the open mic nights. And the ironic thing was, I very distinctly remember saying to myself, oh, I don't need to bring these with me to Japan. What are the odds that I would find an English-speaking comedy night while I'm over there? So I left them behind, much to my own disappointment when I saw this opportunity to try stand-up. And the whole operation was pretty straightforward. It was a comic who you may recognize now. He's called Ollie Horn. And Ollie was at the time, what was he studying? He was studying like intellectual property law at probably Oxford Uni, and he was doing an exchange program to Japan, hence how he was living in Japan as well. And I think Ollie had been doing stand-up for like maybe 1 year when we started up all these shows here. And yeah, he'd moved to Japan, and he met the owners of a bar called CC Cafe. Now, I could do a whole nother episode on this saga of CC Cafe, but I'll give you the nutshell version. CC Cafe was a English school during the day, and it would transform magically into a bar at nighttime. And it was on a street called Oyafgodori, which genuinely translates to something along the lines of street of parental disobedience or disappointment, something along those lines, which was like the hangout for, well, hangout's the wrong word. It was where a lot of the bars that were owned by foreigners tend to spring up. And someone was telling me about the history of the street, and it was something to do with the fact that a lot of the delinquents used to hang out there, so they eventually started calling it Oyafgodori. Dori is road, so a lot of the Japanese, like there was Meiji Dori, which was like the main road in Tenjin. And yeah, CC Cafe was this, it was on Oyafgodori, and it was owned by Chuck and Seiho, and I haven't chatted to these guys for a long time, but honestly, like some of the greatest guys I've ever met, like ever. Chuck was, I guess, like the face. Chuck was what was Chucky? I think he was half Korean, half Japanese, but he spoke English like he was from America. I don't know where he learnt it, because he said he grew up in Japan, so he's just great, yeah. And Chuck was just one of the most, like, I can't even explain how great of a guy Chuck was. He was one of those people that when you talk to him, you just feel like you had his whole attention, and it felt like he was genuinely listening to what you had to say. And then Seiho was the kind of behind-the-scenes guy. Seiho was also a really great guy, but he was less of the people person, I guess. I had heaps of really good chats with him over the years, but he was more of the quiet confidence kind of guy. And I think he was a DJ. He might still be a DJ. I'm not quite sure. I know he goes fishing a lot. But yeah, these two guys created this thing, CC Cafe, and this honestly became like the central hub for so many foreigners living in Fukuoka. And it was like, really, if you were like a regular of CC Cafe, then you were essentially like part of the family. And I remember being really taken aback one time because they put on a lot of events, like a lot of mixing events, and it was one of the few international bars that seemed to genuinely get quite a lot of Japanese people to actually come out to them, because usually, like, the whole stereotype over there is that the foreigner bars, it's just all the expats, all the English teachers there, but CC Cafe had a really good mix of, like, people that lived in Japan and, like, genuinely seemed to be interested in the outside world. And so, like, Ollie had teamed up with these two guys, Chuck and Seiho from CC Cafe, and we put on a comedy show. When I got in touch with Ollie, he was quite chuffed to learn that I was a graphic designer, so I ended up doing pretty much all the posters for CC Cafe over the next 3 years. Sorry, not CC Cafe. It was a group called Comedy Fukuoka, which I think is still running to this day. And yeah, I did most of the designs for them for the next 3 years. I still do a little bit, but it's not as active now that a lot of us are in different countries and doing, people have had kids now, and it's all, we've got a lot going on. And I was actually the first ever performer on the open mic, which they put on. We got a headliner, Nick Milnes, to come over from Singapore. No, sorry, not Singapore, Hong Kong. That's where he was from. Ollie was the host. We had about 3 or 4 other open mic comics. And I had what is known as the bullet spot. I was first up after after Ollie, the host. I did okay. Did a couple of, I can't really remember my jokes. I used to have a video of it, but it's gone missing over the years. I've got my second ever video on my Patreon page. You can join up to patreon.com/Taylor Ruddle Comedy if you want to see my second ever performance. But, much like any 20-something straight white sheltered male, just, dick gags and something about my opening line was something about because this is what's mind blowing is I was actually sick with the cold on my first ever performance. Like I told you, I haven't been sick. I haven't been really sick since 2019, but I used to get sick all the time, and I think honestly just washing my hands more because of the pandemic. Like every time I enter my house, I wash my hands. And that is bizarre to me to think that I would have gone on stage sick back in 2015. So it's good to see that times have changed a little bit, and you wouldn't expect an open mic performer to go on stage sick, and you wouldn't even allow it these days. You'd say, no, go home and rest. So my opening gag was saying, like, of course I got sick. The one time where all I need is to be able to speak clearly and have a bit of energy. On the other hand, there's never been a better time to do cocaine before. And then I think I did an act out of me in the toilets and Ollie saying, Taylor, you ready? And me going, yep, I am now. And then I think I may have said something about, I've already got the dry mouth and red nose, so no one's going to know the difference. So, just great comedy there. Great jokes. And so, yeah, that's basically my origin story. Just by chance, I happened to see a post about it. We had this kind of perfect storm of all these different people that make things happen. We had Chuck and Seho from CC Cafe. We had Ollie Horn, who's very much a get things done sort of person. We had me lending the graphic design. We had another guy who came on board, Stephen Case, who's still a very, very good friend of mine to this day. Is now doing all sorts of cool things with board games and the Edinburgh Festival. So we just had this really, really, really tight crew. One of the things we had to learn how to do, and I think this has served me really well, is we pretty much couldn't repeat any jokes. We had to come up with a new set each time, which has served me really well to try and be disciplined with my writing. We're performing to mostly expats, and another interesting thing that it helped me do is I had to learn to speak very clearly, and I had to drop a lot of my Kiwi slang. Because what would happen is you'd get people in the audience, you'd have a few Americans, a few Brits, but then you'd have a couple from Germany who they spoke English, but it wasn't their native language. So you had to cut away any barriers to them understanding what was going on. You had to make it as clear and as simple as possible. So those two things, which I still carry on to this day, I have to attribute my time performing in Japan to teaching me some good habits that I think have served me very well as a stand-up over here in New Zealand. Well, I think that's about it. I'm coming up on about an hour now, give or take whatever gets cut out of the edit. I hope you enjoyed listening to my comedy origin story, how I got started doing stand-up comedy, and me just waxing about how much I love the city of Fukuoka, and I'd love to go back there someday. I'm sure the present version of me will take over in just a minute to get any plugs in about what's going on, but thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you again very, very soon. Thank you for listening to Ruddle Me This. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. You can find me on social media at Taylor Ruddle Comedy on all the major platforms. You can also join patreon.com/Taylor Ruddle Comedy for free, which gets you access to all sorts of extras and behind the scenes content, as well as allows you to communicate directly with me and let me know what you think of the show. Tune in again next Monday for another episode of Ruddle Me This, and until then, Ruddle her out.
This has been a Tape Deck Media production. Thank you for listening.
Hey Ruddlers, I joined a group of podcasters that we are calling the Trailer Alliance, a group of podcasters that share each other's trailers at the end of the episodes and generally support each other. So at the end of each episode for the next few weeks, I'm going to be playing a trailer of one of the members of the Trailer Alliance. And here's one of them now. I hope you like it.
What's up, everyone? This is JJ. Listen, I'm always wanting to try to engage with you all, but some of you are still so shy. Please don't be shy. I'm not going to bite. Hit me up on IG, lifepodcast_84. However, if you don't want to hit me on IG, you want to hit me through email, that's fine. You can hit me at thisisthelifepodcast84@gmail.com. Again, thisisthelifepodcast84@gmail.com. IG, Instagram, hit me, live podcast _84. Come on, y'all. Let's be live. Let's be active. Love.